in a very long time. I think it's going to be that leadership that people are looking for. People are talking about things like honesty or integrity. People I hear it just about every day when I go into work. They're sick of political parties. They're sick of politicians. They don't want to see just the same old, same old. There are a couple independents running in this race. One, a well-known political name in former Commissioner Tim McCormick. One, a person who hasn't run before, but who apparently has a lot of money to spend on trucks and planes and buses and things. I think what you may see is the vote fracturing a bit. But what I hope we do see is a consensus developing by November. And I know that we're going to need to work hard to see a consensus developing behind the winner. We will probably have a divided government in a sense. That doesn't mean I'm conceding we won't win a majority of the council seats. In fact, you may be surprised as you start looking at those races in your own particular district across the county as to how competitive we are in some of the districts. Some is down in the Parma Heights, Seven Hills area with Arlene McNamara, who's with us here today. We're very pleased to have the depth and breadth of experience that we have running across the county in the many districts. All but one district competed for by a Republican. But I do think in many senses we'll have a divided government and even still perhaps a divided Democratic Party. We intend to show that the Republican Party, and particularly our candidates we nominate, candidates who don't view the Republican Party as where they take their cues from or where they get their marching orders, but candidates who understand that they're expected to lead, that we want to nominate people who are qualified, experienced, and ready to lead, and then we plan to support them and look to their vision as we move forward into this new county government. Now I really should duck.
A lot of public commentary about the stridency of the partisanship, particularly in Washington, but in the state as well. You think that's a fair commentary, or is this sort of what it's been historically? If it is a fair comment that it's more pronounced today than in the past, what's the reason for that?
Well, I am concerned that in the current environment we have such what appears to be many times inability for people to disagree, and to disagree civilly, and to hash out those disagreements and to still be able to work together. But I also am concerned that we seem to have a tendency, particularly in our media, and I'm not going to point fingers at who on which side is doing this more, but I will say, I guess I will a little bit, it seems to be some coming from the current administration in Washington, to take any disagreement and denounce it as obstructive. And when people get angry and protest what our government is doing, we hear about the coarsening of the public discourse. But look, first of all, I think there's a reason behind it. And Bill Kristol recently wrote, I thought we might talk about this a little bit today, and I had a quote from Bill Kristol that we've allowed our universities to become politically correct, our media to become juvenile, our entitlements, and our entertainments to become ever more adolescent. And then we wonder why we're baffled by the difficulties we have as a society as being candid, serious, and grown up. Grown-ups, this is back to my own words here, that was the end of Kristol's quote. Grown-ups are able to disagree, to argue, to debate, yet remain civil. Our debate is not coarsening, in my opinion. We're just getting less tolerant of disagreement. And let me give you an example of what in some quarters was once found acceptable in this country. On May 22nd, 1856, Democratic Congressman Preston Brooks beat Senator Charles Sumner with his cane in the Senate chamber because of an anti-slavery speech the Republican Sumner had made 3 days earlier. I heard a couple kind of giggles or twitters there, but let me tell you what occurred. Brooks confronted Sumner as he sat writing at his desk in the almost empty Senate chamber. As Sumner began to stand up, Brooks began beating Sumner with his thick gutta-percha cane with a gold head. Sumner was trapped under the heavy desk, which was bolted to the floor, but Brooks continued to bash Sumner until he ripped the desk from the floor, By this time, Sumner was blinded by his own blood, and he staggered up the aisle and collapsed, lapsing into unconsciousness. Brooks continued to beat Sumner until he broke his cane, then quietly left the chamber. Several other senators attempted to help Sumner, but were blocked by Brooks' Democratic colleague, Congressman Lawrence Keitt, who was brandishing a pistol and shouting, "Let them be." Congressman Sumner was, Senator Sumner was unable to return to his Senate duties for more than 3 years while he recovered. He later became one of the most influential Republicans throughout the conduct of the American Civil War and on through the early years of Reconstruction. After the attack, Congressman Brooks survived an expulsion vote in the House, but resigned his seat, returning home where he was lauded as a hero. He claimed both that he, quote, meant no disrespect to the Senate of the United States by attacking Sumner, and that he did not intend to kill him, for if he had, he would have used a different weapon. His constituents then returned him to Congress. When one of Sumner's Republican colleagues, Congressman Burlingame, challenged Brooks to a duel, Brooks accepted, then failed to show. He died the following year of croup. Let us not hear how our current civil debate is too hostile or too confrontational, but let us not also return to that sordid past. Let us learn the tolerance of disagreement and the ability to disagree civilly and debate to proper solutions.
You spoke earlier of having more adult behavior on the part of our Congress and our elected leaders in Washington. The older President Bush, back during his term of office, increased the gas tax the last time the trust fund began to get a little low. He didn't increase it really enough to get it toward normal, but it hasn't been increased since then and was so vilified by everyone that now everyone is afraid to raise the gas tax. So at this point, in Ohio at least, almost half of all of our highway maintenance dollars, which aren't nearly enough to keep the infrastructure in good repair, come from general fund sources where they should be coming out of user fees. What comment do you have on the ability to have certain government programs that have been traditionally funded by user fees, truly funded by user fees?
Well, first of all, in our current environment, I don't think we're in a time when we can think about raising taxes. So to the extent of, and a tax by any name, user fee, or other word that we would use to call it. And that's an unfortunate situation in which we find ourselves. I do think, and we've found many times, conservative proposals more willing to go down the line of, well, if we're going to need to fund something somehow, and if this is something we can bring ourselves to support, let's target the revenue that we're going to raise. Let's target the raising of the revenue towards the appropriate use. So in concept, yes, it's a good idea. Let's get back, though, to the idea of thinking about raising gas tax right now as one example, or raising any tax, quite honestly, right now, for example. We are in a state right now that is not a friendly business environment. At a time when we need to create jobs, at a time when we need to attract investment to our state. One of our real assets here as a state is our location. Okay, and this becomes a real double-edged sword, because if we're well located, but we're taxing fuel so heavily that it becomes cost prohibitive to come on through here. But if our roads are in disrepair, how can anybody get a truck or any other way get on over and through here? Well, I've noted with, for example, John Kasich, who is notably running for governor this year and is our nominee, and who we have endorsed in the Cuyahoga County Republican Party to be our next governor.